Greetings and welcome. You're tuned into TMH's Daily English News. As we move on to our headlines for today, analysts have said that reaching a permanent ceasefire is the first expected outcome of negotiations within the country of Ethiopia, and the Tigray opposition party says trading off genocide for geopolitical interests is just perilous, and the Beta Queen from Tigray has described a harrowing ordeal of her travel to the UK while escaping this ongoing conflict. As we move on to our main updates, analysts say reaching a permanent ceasefire should be the first expected outcome within negotiations in this peace talks. Kalu Mesai, an analyst, wrote on Ethiopia Insight and said the peace process is daunting for all involved and that people should not expect immediate breakthroughs. We have had bloodbaths that killed many emotions and are understandably high. This also means that the trust level is extremely low, he noted. He said even with the genuine goodwill from both federal and Tigrayan sides, the challenges they will face are still very complex. The analyst said confidence-building measures can also slowly be built and other contentious issues discussed as well following the signing of a permanent ceasefire. What is advised now is to start with low-hanging fruits such as federal government consolidating the humanitarian truce, which has contributed to improved humanitarian assistance within the Tigray region, he said. He also emphasized that the resumption by the federal government of basic services into the Tigray region is another measure that should be taken, as it would also help in boosting confidence and enhancing support for the negotiation process from the Tigrayan public. He also called for an increased support from the UN and its humanitarian partners who have experience in providing aid in areas controlled by a non-state actor. He cautioned the public that this kind of negotiations takes time, thus requiring patience, also perseverance. Tigray opposition political parties also say trading off genocide for geopolitical interests is perilous. Tigray Independence Party, National Congress of Greater Tigray, and Salsai Wayana Tigray made the remark in a joint press release. They said the regime in Addis Ababa has continued its genocidal mission on Tigray with the same zeal and passion as ever, maintaining an iron-grip siege on Tigray without any sign of relief, despite the repeated calls from different corners to lift it up. Tens of thousands of Tigrayans are languishing in Nazi-like concentration camps only because of their Tigrayan identity, as the three opposition political parties stated in their press release. They added that the Ethiopian government, despite its gimmick for peace, is still continuing arbitrary arrests of innocent Tigrayans. The regime has also continued to sabotage the flow of humanitarian aid into the Tigray region using various pretexts. All these are happening in total disregard to international law, international norms, including principles. Referring to the Ethiopian government's talk of resolving the war on Tigray through negotiations, they said is just another subterfuge with a sinister objective of thawing the pressure that have been mounting on the regime from the international community. The three parties criticized the support of some members of the international community, like the World Bank, the European Union, Germany, and government of Italy, who are extending the regime. We strongly believe that the tendency of the international community to trade off breaches of universal humanitarian rights, values, and international law for a geopolitical interest will have far-reaching harmful consequences in the region and beyond, they said. The press release underlined that the interest of any nation cannot be secured by appeasing dictatorship and passively permitting genocide on Tigrayans. They reminded the international community that any form of collaboration with the Ethiopian regime disregarding universal human rights law and values is providing help and handing to genocide on Tigray. We hope that the international community will continue to stand firm for respect to the universal values and principles of democracy as well as human rights. USAID Chief Samantha Power discusses humanitarian aid in northern Ethiopia. Power, who's touring East Africa, held a roundtable discussion with 5 USAID implementing partners providing affected communities in northern Ethiopia humanitarian assistance to the conflict-ridden areas. The discussion focused on the resilience of the Ethiopian people and the current humanitarian conditions on the ground, including scale and severity of food insecurity, as well as the ongoing trauma from this ongoing conflict, violence especially perpetrated against women, and months of deprivation as well. Despite improvements in humanitarian access in recent months, the humanitarian situation in the northern region remains extremely concerning. And according to a press release by her office, the Administrative Power expressed USAID's commitment to assisting partners as they work to tackle response and the challenges meets the needs of the Ethiopian people. The discussion also stressed that the need for the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray forces to build upon the humanitarian truce and facilitate unhindered humanitarian access that allows for significant and sustained provision of humanitarian assistance as well. In addition, Administrative Power and the group of partners talked about the need to restore basic services, including banking, electricity, telecommunication, and commercial fuel to supply all of the need within the Tigray region. Power has announced that the U.S. is providing an additional $1.2 billion in humanitarian assistance to the Horn of Africa. The opposition caucus discussed with the diplomatic community on the need to salvage Ethiopia from quote-unquote possible disintegration. Leaders of the recently formed caucus of opposition parties have met with the members of the diplomatic community at the British Embassy in Addis Ababa. In attendance at the meeting were high-ranking officials from the Oromo Federalist Congress, Oromo Liberation Front, Ogaden National Liberation Front, Arena Tigray, Afar's People's Party, and Hibar Ethiopia. Centering on the discussions around the national dialogue and the overall Ethiopian national context, diplomats from British, Danish, Australia, Canadian, and German embassies were briefed by the aforementioned caucus's representative on how to redeem the country from possible disintegration. The need for a robust international presence to ensure the success of such efforts was also extremely stressed. Addis Standard previously reported that a conglomerate of the 10 opposition parties formed caucus of opposition parties, and the concerned parties stated that the caucus presented an alternative to the national dialogue process. The caucuses had urged that the national dialogue process be conducted in a way that was inclusive, transparent, and participatory in the presence of neutral interlocutors from the international community to bring about the solution for fundamental dilemmas distressing the Ethiopian state. Goitom Ghebreselassie hopes for peace in Ethiopia after her marathon win over the weekend. Ethiopia's Goitom Ghebreselassie hopes that peace can prevail in her country after winning the women's marathon at the World's Athletic Championships. The 27-year-old beat Kenya's Judith Korir in Eugene in a time of 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 11 seconds to set a new world championship record. Since late 2020, a bloody conflict has been ongoing in Ethiopia's northern region in Tigray, where the marathon champion is originally from, and the Ethiopian government maintains a siege and a blockade of aid still currently. I would have liked to hear and see my mother and father celebrating my victory, said Goitom Ghebreselassie in her post-victory interview, referring to the communication blackout that's been imposed in the Tigray region. Tigrayan analyst Seifa Selassie Gabrameskel wrote on his Twitter account that due to Ethiopia's siege of Tigray, 7 million people, including Goitom's parents, don't have food, medicine, electricity, bank, and phone communication. Ghebreselassie showed her emotion after the race, breaking into tears when asked what her victory meant for her and her country. She said, "I wish all Ethiopians to be victorious in everything they do. Women can all be winners when they work hard for themselves and for their country. And I wish for peace in my country, in all of Ethiopia," as the marathon champion added. As we move on to our final update for today, beauty queen from Ethiopia's war-wracked Tigray describes a harrowing ordeal of her travel to the UK while escaping the Tigray region. Timnit Bayru has more on this story from the BBC.
Salamait Tigrai, a famous beauty queen in Tigray, experienced a harrowing ordeal during her journey across the English Channel to seek asylum in the UK she re-encountered. Salam traveled to France last year before risking her life to cross the Channel on a boat packed with migrants according to a report by the BBC. She stated that trying to reach the UK was arduous and frightening, saying she saw her fellow Tigrayans drown in the sea. "I'm a survivor of the English Channel. November 2021 is the month I will never forget in my life," she stated. The beauty queen remembers how she and other migrants spent nights taking shelter in France, stayed in bushes in Calais for about 2 weeks, exposed to severe cold, starvation, and thirst. She added they had waited for different smugglers and negotiated payment with them, noting that they transported migrants at night to avoid being caught by the police. The first batch of migrants from Tigray tried to cross the channel, but they both sank. Coast Guards managed to save the migrants, but the story of the incident left those who had not yet made the journey in shock. When they did board their dinghy, they offset the engine fell into the sea. One of the Arab men on the boat jumped to rescue it, but was unable. So an Ethiopian man jumped in after, but he never came back. We heard him shouting. We couldn't find him. He made desperate calls for help. However, the lifeguards arrived 3 hours later. "Our brother drowned in front of me," she lamented. The Arab man, however, made it back to the boat. 3 or 4 days after she reached the UK, third round of passengers tried to cross the channel. We didn't hear good news. All drowned. 2 of my compatriots were among the dead. One of them, I knew her from my hometown, Ma'ala, Salamite said. "I wept for myself. I wept for my people. And I wept for my parents. My parents didn't know I was coming to this country in this way," she said. "When I started the journey, I said to myself that it can be no worse than what I suffered in Tigray. We've seen terrible things back home," she added. According to a study by independent researchers at Belgium's Ghent University, the war that broke out in November 2020 has claimed hundreds and thousands of lives. The war and siege imposed by the federal government has caused famine, rape, and unspeakable. Bank accounts in Tigray have also been frozen, and no one can get their money. Salamoit never thought she would ever leave my country, nor had she ever had desire to. Whenever she used to go abroad for beauty pageants or other work, she always returned. She said she had her own business in Mu'alla where she designed and sold traditional and modern fabrics. At the time, business in Mu'alla was roaring, so she was doing well. Displacement, woe, and distress were experienced by every Tigrayan. It happened to me and my family as well.
Thank you, Timnit, and that concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.